So, the Sonic character has been in our lives for about 30 plus years. Jesus, I'm old. So obviously the character has gotten some change to them as the years go by. His design has changed, his art style has changed, his voice has sadly changed over and over again, and most notably, his writing has changed. Or has it? It's no secret when the 2010s rolled around that the series took a nosedive in, well, everything, and the series has tried to remedy the issue with things like the IDW comics and most recently, Sonic Frontiers. But still, there is that section of fans that aren't satisfied with them, in fact reject them as nothing like the Sonic they knew, or the definitive or real Sonic that once existed back in 1991 all the way to 2009. To them, Sonic is a free spirit. He doesn't worry about others' freedom other than his own. He never tries to redeem anyone, let alone his enemies. He's not a hero. He doesn't care about whether his enemies become his friends. It doesn't matter to him what's wrong or what's right. He just does things that he believes are right. This interpretation comes full speed into how he is written nowadays, which to people is the opposite of what Sonic is as a character, especially by us filthy Westerners who only write him as some sort of narcissistic superhero who talks about his morals all the time and tries to force them to think his way instead of just being Sonic the Hedgehog. Yes, Sonic the Hedgehog is a Japanese franchise that should only be written by Japanese writers. Bring back Shiro Maekawa or let Toyota write the series from now on. Obviously those last parts were me joking. Not to put down Maekawa or Toyota as writers, because they are very good. Maekawa especially, since he is one of those writers that makes the characters, especially Sonic, feel so alive. He's also the same guy that helped supervise Sonic X in his third season, but I do feel that Kyoko Yoshimura was the one that saved the show from being a boring slog with his third season of the show. Toyota is also decent as he gets the characters as well. Now yes, us Americans have in the past changed the character and series back in the day, which again led to the whole debacle of what's truly the character and what isn't. However, I feel that's not the case anymore, especially when us Americans are still helping write for the series while also trying to make sense of this abomination of lore. No, this isn't me defending movie Sonic or heaven forbid Prime Sonic. This isn't a Sonic is Sonic discussion. I find that discussion very flawed. It's like saying Goku is Goku while arguing that Evolution Goku is Toriyama's Goku. But as I describe what Japanese Sonic is to a lot of people and how they don't see that in Sonic nowadays, in products like in IDW and Frontiers, all I have to say is, I disagree wholeheartedly on that interpretation. Yes, I say interpretation because I feel like there's this weird interpretation of Sonic that some people have molded into being the true and definitive Sonic. It's like how Dragon Ball fans, and sadly Toriyama himself, treat Goku as someone who only cares about fighting strong opponents and nothing else. Even though in the Piccolo Daima arc, he was looking for revenge for the death of Krillin and later Master Roshi, not for a good fight. Even though in the Saiyan arc, he fought Raditz not for the sake of a good fight, but to get his son back. And when given the info that there might be two stronger Saiyans than Raditz, it doesn't make him excited, but it terrifies him. Even though when he fights Frieza, he doesn't do it as a way to fight a strong opponent, or that it makes him excited, but to avenge all the Saiyans and Namekians that Frieza murdered. Now I agree that Sonic isn't Superman, he's not Batman, he's not Captain America, he doesn't see himself as a hero, and I'm okay with that. However, he's barely any of the things some fans proclaim him to be, or say the action he does and says in IDW or Sonic Frontiers are out of character or not their Sonic. And no, I'm not going against the sacred Jedi texts that are the manuals or SEGA or beloved Japanese writers. I'm going against the notion that certain people in the fandom give on who Sonic really is as a character. So please, bear with me here. Now this whole tiresome debate started around 2 years ago with this little panel right here where Sonic gives his speech to Surge. It caused a huge discourse that rages on today that people still won't get over, like this is the worst thing this series has ever done. People close to me already know how I feel about this moment. I didn't find anything wrong with it besides it being too long. Nonetheless, I found it something Sonic would definitely say. People in the fanbase disagree. They feel this was the straw that broke the camel's back when it came to IDW Sonic as a character. That he was now some jerk who only cared about his morals and being proven right rather than just being the Sonic that they know and love. Where they got to this conclusion again is their own interpretation rather than the actual truth. No, IDW Sonic doesn't care about being proven right or about his morals. He never even once said that these morals are morals. Not once. It's his enemies calling it that. To me, this is just Sonic telling straight up how he lives his life and how he prefers to give people their freedom. But Sonic isn't supposed to be like that. That's a complete portrayal of his character. Is it? Is it really? Now, the one thing I agree with this is that Sonic is a bit too wordy here. Even Ian Flynn, the writer of said issue and writer of the English version of Sonic Frontiers, has made a comment that Sonic should be making speeches like this.
Maybe I stubbed my toe and put a little too much in here or there. That's up for folks to debate. But in general, yeah, Sonic should not be soliloquizing, monologuing.
Good enough.
He is pretty straightforward and to the point. And so when he is going on, it's for an actual purpose. And whether or not that has been executed well, I leave that to the individual to assess for themselves.
Now, I can understand the weirdness of him making wordy speeches, but I have to argue that is the nature of comic books, a medium notorious for having overly long dialogue. Ian Flynn, at the end of the day, is a comic book writer first. While writing Frontiers, he talks about the difference between writing a comic and writing for a game. This is where the disconnect comes from on the opposite sides of the fandom. While there's one side that says Sonic would never ever say or do these things, there's also a side that says and hell uses the games as an example of Sonic saying these types of things to his enemies. I would also like to debunk the notion that he does this shtick with all his enemies in the comics. People like Starline or Zavok, he has shown no sign of ever trying to get them to reform or see things his way. Hell, he even tells Zavok that if he ever comes back, he will kick his ass again. And even brushed off the fact that Starline died, so he's not this goody two-shoes pacifistic character as some people like to perceive with this character. Now for the people who say he doesn't care about other people's freedom, I have to ask how they got to that summation when Sonic Adventure is right there. People swear up and down that he didn't care that Chaos didn't have his own freedom, when the literal dialogue given to Tikal is him saying that he will never be free.
それはダメだ。それじゃ今までと同じじゃないか。あいつの心は怒りと悲しみに縛られたままだ。永遠に解放されはしない。
Free meaning being freed of the anger and pain that he has suffered due to what the Echidna tribe did thousands of years ago. Like, he doesn't say things just to say them. Especially throughout his campaign and the last story, he was being shown the backstory of Chaos and why he's the way he is. It is point blank, right from the first official 3D Sonic game, that Sonic is capable of caring for others' freedom and would want to help them to reform for their sake and not his own. Especially when the entirety of said gang, he was just fighting them. This selfless act is enough for people to understand that there's more to Sonic than how some people perceive him or his actions to be. But Patrolman! Sonic is an idea, not a character. He's not supposed to be a traditional character. Naoto Oshima even said that Sonic was a fairy-like character. And I agree with that. Sonic is an idea. He's a metaphor. But so is Monkey D. Luffy. So is Solid Snake. So is Lupin the Third. So is Heihachi Mishima before Tekken 7 ruined him. They're all ideas. But that doesn't change the fact that they're characters. Flat characters, mind you. Though I argue Snake develops a lot in MGS1. But characters nonetheless. Characters have range or some semblance of emotion or characteristics that makes them special in who they are. Sonic is no different. And with the way some people in the fandom try to mandate and give him do's and don'ts on what this character is supposed to be like, you make him sound like the most boring character of all time. And Sonic isn't boring. Like, to try to make arguments that there are things in English Sonic that don't exist or were never a thing in Japanese Sonic, like Sonic isn't cocky, he's just confident and playful. Even though cocky people are notoriously known for being playful, even Izuka has said that Sonic is a little cocky to say the least. It's like if you went up to a DMC fan and told them that Dante isn't a cocky character. They laugh at your face about it and not take you seriously. I don't even need to use the games as an example. Sonic X, the show where they get the characterizations right, yeah right, shows that Sonic is a cocky character. In the very first episode nonetheless. That goes the same for him boasting about himself and having an ego. Now it's not as out there and blatant like a certain fat doctor, but it's clear as day that there is some semblance of an ego within him.
テイルスに連れてきてもらっちゃった。でもいいのかな、そんな態度で。見れば随分とお困りのようですけど。
俺は俺の偽物の手がかりを探すためにわざと捕まってんだ。任せとけって。走ることなら誰にも負けはしないさ。よし。
Ha! I'm the world's fastest hedgehog. Check it out. You'll be calling me sir before you know it.
俺にできないことができるお前を尊敬してる。恥ずかしいこと言わせんなよ。
そんな、僕にしかできないこと？
ああ、もう言わないけどな。俺は薄汚いネズミなんかじゃない。ちょっとすごいハリネズミなんだよ。
Even Eggman, the guy who knows him better than anyone else, can say that he has an ego, and this isn't some biased narrator type of situation. It's clear the two have some connection that can't be described so simply. So when I hear Eggman say that Sonic has an ego, then I'll believe that. And these don'ts that people say that the character of Sonic would never do are almost unfounded. Like, he would never criticize people's decisions, but respect them entirely. Because some non-canon ending of Shadow the Hedgehog which played like, I didn't change sides, Sonic. I just don't like you. Heh, okay, Shadow. Wanna throw hands then? Is the best example. No, seriously, that's how the cutscene played out.
おい、シャドウ！なぜあの黒い奴らの味方をする？
奴らの味方？何をくだらんことを。僕はただ、ソニック、お前が気に食わないだけだ。
そいつは分かりやすくっていいや。じゃあやるか！
望むところ。
God, that game is so weird sometimes. But yes, this is another complaint detractors have with the IDW comic version of him, because he's always criticizing his adversaries' actions and how wrong they are. The best example is with Metal Sonic, where at first when he let him go, he tells Tails that he will respect his decision, and then later on the Metal Virus, he criticizes him for going back to Eggman, making him some sort of hypocrite. Guys, there's a difference between respecting someone's decision and liking someone's decision. Especially when someone's said decision costs you some friends in this borderline zombie apocalypse. But Metal had no choice. He even told Sonic he couldn't rebel against Eggman. Metal can still think for himself and make decisions for himself. He just can't betray Eggman like he did so in the past. Sonic never asked him to betray him, just to find a life without him. Metal voluntarily chose the latter himself. In reality, Metal is the hypocrite. How are you going to pride yourself as being the real Sonic when you clearly refuse to have the one thing that makes Sonic, Sonic? But hey, that's IDW. The mighty game in Japanese Sonic would never do that. Well, let's look at what everyone's favorite 6 out of 10 game has to say about that.
What good is a world that goes on forever?
My sorrow at its ruin runs deeper than the depths of the underworld. Do you not understand?
No, and I don't want to!
What understand how magnificent an everlasting kingdom would be?
What I can't understand is how you can call such a boring-sounding place magnificent!
You could never understand my sorrow at seeing the ruinous future of this kingdom.
Good, cause I don't ever want to know such one-sided sadness.
Make any type of counter-argument of this, but at the end of the day, this is not Sonic respecting anything, but it's him downright criticizing Marlena's entire worldview and the actions that she has taken. Much like with Metal, much like with Surge, much like with Eggman of all people. But that one's a different topic for another story. But Patrolman! Sonic is fine for what he believes is right, not that he thinks he is right, unlike IDW's moral grandstanding ass. It's just like the song says. It doesn't matter who's wrong and who is right. That is a go-to song for some people, right? I'm not gonna debate what is the most definitive Sonic song. Hashtag his world's better, don't at me. But I want to try to analyze some parts of that song. Most notably, I can't tell what is wrong and what is right. I've got to find the answer. But until I do, there is no way I will ever give up. He's trying to find the answer. Like not stealing chaos but destroying his anger is his answer. A world will always have its end, but what we do with it at this time is what matters, is his answer. Everyone deserving their own freedom is his answer. But if you're still not convinced that Sonic would never criticize someone's decision, then remember that shadow scene in his game that people like to use? Well, check this scene out in the show that gets the characters right, Sonic X. Before they have that terribly animated fight, Sonic and Shadow have a little chat.
目障りなハリネズミめ、カオスエメラルドは渡してもらうぞ。
カオスエメラルドを集めてどうするつもりだ。またまた誰かさんの言いなりってわけか。究極が聞いて呆れるぜ。
That is Sonic criticizing and downright insulting Shadow for his decision on following Eggman's orders. He literally told him that he's no ultimate life form. Does that sound like a Sonic that is respecting someone's decision? Now I've used Chaos and Merlina already, but those two are also important to this next point of Sonic never tries to redeem a villain. And this has some weight. He's killed Eraser Jin and King Arthur. With the help of Shadow, they killed the Biolizard. He was forced to kill a Merlin in battle. The guy isn't Naruto Uzumaki. He has a body count. Now I get people getting tired of IDW always trying and always failing to get his villains to turn to the good side. Even though I already said that in the beginning of this that this was never the case with people like Zavok and Starline. And I understand it does seem odd that he's fixated on making people like Eggman and Metal come to the side of good. Though I argue with Metal, it was more he wanted him to have more freedom in his life. But you gotta understand, there's a reason for it. Sonic met Tinker, who was an amnesiac Eggman, yes, but he was still Eggman who would do good things for people, whether big or small. He saw that Eggman was happy with this life, so their argument in issue 23 makes sense in a way that Sonic is confused that Eggman would just throw away being happy. And even in that same issue, you see that Eggman has some semblance of missing that old life. Someone will make the argument that Eggman had amnesia and wasn't himself. Well, Shadow had amnesia, and more or less he was still himself. Tinker, like Eggman, wants to help people, but one was extremely kind and selfless, while the other was, well, Eggman. This may be weird for me to say, but Eggman as a character has some redeeming qualities. You've seen this in games like SA2 and Shadow and hell, the third season of Sonic X. Oshima once said that Eggman doesn't see himself as a villain because he wants to help make the world a better place with his genius. The problem with him is just, he's a stubborn, narcissistic, fat douchebag. I also like to dispel the notion that IDW makes it seem like Sonic always wanted Eggman to be good, when no, that's never been the case. Not even when Sonic met Tinker bought the whole good shtick when they first met. But Patrolman, why would Sonic want Eggman to be good? He's his source of adventure and fun. Alright, hold on for a second, because that makes no sense to me. I know these two have a mutual respect for one another, but their lives don't revolve around one another. It's why I don't like how their relationship is portrayed in Sonic X. An adventure for Sonic can mean anything to him. It never always has to revolve around fighting Eggman. It's a full-blown fallacy. Hell, remember that Sonic Channel Q&A that people mostly use to prove a point that Japanese Sonic is so different from Western Sonic? Remember that line where Sonic said he wouldn't believe Eggman would ever turn a new leaf? Well, if you watch the part after that, he says that if Eggman actually did that, he would just find a new adventure to go on. These two are not Batman and Joker no matter how you slice it. But I digress. Back to the case, he never tries to redeem his villains. You gotta look at the context of things. He never tried to redeem Shadow because he was pissed off at him for framing and belittling him. He never tried to redeem Silver because he was busy protecting Elise. However, like I used before, he has redeemed Chaos and Merlina before. Hell, he's redeemed Blaze, and before someone says, Blaze wasn't a villain, redeeming isn't exclusive to villains. It's just a popular thing to write. The definition of redeem is to compensate for the faults or bad aspects of something. Blaze in her debut game had faults. She was socially distant. She was too fixated on her responsibility and her duty. She wanted to do things on her own with no one's help. It got so bad she literally threatened and attempted to kill Sonic for being in her way. But Sonic, with the help of Cream and I guess Amy, but who cares, shows that she doesn't have to do this alone and that she can rely on her friends to help. This was enough to change her mindset on things going into the last story. I mean, Jesus, Blaze spells it out at the end. But then, after all that has been said, there is this one notion that confuses me about people's perception of Sonic as a character. Because not only is that not true, it feels like a complete disservice for him as a character. Sonic just gives advice and leaves. Since when? Sonic didn't give Shara advice and left her. He gave her a mountain of handkerchiefs so she can cry as much as she wants, due to now her abuser is gone. Sonic's words to Merlina aren't words of advice, but words of encouragement, as she was defeated. Everything that she worked hard for has been destroyed, and the person who is at her side is the man who was the cause of her failure, but gave the same flower that she put down earlier in the game as a symbolism that she should cherish life instead of running away of the inevitability of it coming to an end. He didn't give advice to Blaze and left her. Well, technically, he had to leave to save their universes, but again, his words weren't advice. Just like Merlina, they were encouragement to let people in and let your friends help you, something he was spewing at her throughout the game. He's not an advice giver, he's a comforter, a shoulder to cry on, not a damn fortune cookie. Describing his actions like that to me goes against his heart of gold nature. Not only is this a blatant example of fan interpretation, it's just straight bullshit. And the biggest example of this notion not being the case is, you guessed it, Sonic X. I don't even like this show besides the 3rd season, but I keep using this as an example to prove my point. What does that say about me? Am I a sellout? Anyway, in the final episodes of Season 2, Chris Thorndike decides he wants Sonic all to himself and kidnaps him from being sent back home. Man, this kid is so selfish, no wonder people hate this spoiled brat. But anyway, the two have one last adventure together by themselves. It's not them taking down baddies or anything, just traveling together to Chris's old family vacation home. And then we finally get the one-on-one conversation where Chris finally lets out how much it was wrong to keep Sonic here, and how it was hard to let go of someone that made him a better person. And he doesn't want to go back to being alone. But Sonic being himself comforts him and gives him the right words to calm him down. And think of what he's getting at. It's actually a good set of episodes. But one takeaway of this moment between the two is this.
エメラルド。そうか。ソニックはもうカオスコントロールを起こせるんだもんね。全部集めることなんてすぐにできちゃうんだ。
Sonic could have left at any time, but chose to stay for Chris's sake, just so he can get the closure he desperately needed and move on. He spent one more day with his best friend, because he knows that it's hard for Chris to say goodbye, and in the end, it was hard for Sonic to say goodbye as well. God damn it, this show can have good writing when it feels like it. But I digress. This is the best example of why the whole notion of him just giving advice and leaving is such a fallacy. You know, what gets me is the hypocrisy of this whole thing. Those same people of the fandom want Sonic to have his attitude back, but hate him when he displays it. You want him to be more of a jerk, but hate him when he acts like one. And then we get to Sonic Frontiers, which arguably has the best Sonic in a long time. But some complaints over this characterization feels rather odd to me. To get the giant elephant out of the room, if you're one of those people who doesn't think that the Sonic from 1991 to 2009 hasn't come back because his voice was deeper than usual, then I say this with all sorts of kindness.
Not happy about that? Get over it.
I know it's a bit jarring to hear, especially when Roger Craig Smith's Sonic is already controversial to begin with, but I'm not going to demonize an entire characterization because of that, especially when it's because of the game's melancholic tone and voice direction. Yes, voice direction, not because the character matured like people who try to defend and also demonize say. Nothing about this Sonic feels mature. The reason why I use tone and voice direction as the real reason is because the Japanese version is quite literally the same. Junichi Kanemaru's voice in Frontiers is just as deep as Roger's. That even took me aback more than Roger's. He's always had this energetic voice to him, ever since his first performance in Sonic Adventure 1.
Great! ご機嫌だね。よーなコウ遅かったな。蹴りはついたぜ。機内上映も機内食もないんじゃねえ。それに俺は走る方が好きなのさ。なーに探せば見つかるさ。なあなコウス。
おい、俺がその鍵を探すのか？
期待してるぜ。世界一のトレジャーハンター。悪役が板についてきたじゃないか、ドクター。
狩りに来ておったのか。
あんなもんよりナッコーズの動かすシャトルの方がよっぽどスレレンだったぜ。はっ、せっかくのご招待だぜ。気が洗って待ってな、エッグマン。派手なパーティーにしてやるぜ。急がなきゃ楽しいことが終わっちまう。Thanks。じゃあインフィニット、ついでに教えてくれ。お前の好きな色は、寂しい夜に聴きたい曲は、お前の力の秘密は、なんなら最後のだけでもいいぜ。ここにカオスエメラルドの反応があったのか。俺たちで阻止しないとな。
共感を
すまない。やっぱり全力で行かせてもらうぜ。待ってろよ。今出してやる。タングルだったらこの辺りの遺跡、喜んで登りたがるだろうよ。
So the reason here he sounds so different in Frontiers makes me think that this is a voice direction thing. And then there's the notion that this song doesn't have the attitude or edge like he originally had back in the 2000s. Okay, he never had the edge or attitude in games like 06, Unleashed, and Adventure 1, so why get on Frontiers' case? And yes, I use Unleashed, don't lie. Don't try to use the beginning of the game like it's the opening scene of Up. Sonic's portrayal in Unleashed barely had any edge. And then there are scenes that were criticized where I try my best to see what is the issue here, like one of Sonic's conversations with the new character Sage. This scene to me was one of Sonic's best moments as a character, but to some people it's an issue to them.
You're always talking about odds and simulations, but we living beings don't live by calculations. The will to live, the drive to achieve, the desire to protect the ones you love, that kind of thing can grant a power you can't imagine.
Love can be converted into power. Do you have any data to back this proposed conversion?
Nope. That's what makes it miraculous. But if you really need proof, I'll whip you up a miracle by the end of all this. You'll see.
Oh, Sonic is too out of character here. It's word and he's monologuing. It's 2 sentences. Sonic is lecturing Sage. He really isn't. He's just giving Sage his perspective on life, when compared to how she is viewing it. Sonic is more action speaks louder than words. What do you think he's been doing throughout the whole game before and after his talk with Sage? Sonic is being too blunt here. Yes, Mr. Real Superpower Teamwork has never been blunt with his words. Not once. Ever. God, even Forces, which is one of the only 2010 Sonic stories written in Japanese first, has Sonic be blunt with his words.
違うな、インフィニット。本当の無限の力はハート、ソウル、それと友情の絆さ。3つが偽物のお前たちにはない力だ。
I swear any change to that scene to make it sound more like Sonic just hurts the scene even more. Not to mention the notion that he's some therapist in the game since he's talking to the other characters throughout the game about their problems. Again, like I said, Sonic is a shoulder to cry on. If someone has a problem, he will listen to them and tend to it in his own way.
I know you'll do great. I want to hear all about it when you come back. You may be the last, but you're not alone. You've got us, Knucklehead. So do it. Get out there and live a little. Dude, relax. You've got brains like Eggman, speed like me, and can fly with your butt. It's okay if you still need help sometimes. That's just part of growing up.
Now to segue into something. During the days of issue 50 of IDW when it came out, Ian Flynn had something interesting to say when talking about Sonic's overall attitude in that issue.
This is basically the SEGA standard, just more overtly stated, I guess.
Some people will say that he's talking out of his ass to excuse his writing of that issue. But I tend to take his word on that because if we look at the Japanese version of Frontiers, where they change all the characters' arcs from the English version, his whole deal with trying to redeem and help Sage is still there roughly intact.
なんで敵対するの？でもこの子から悪い感じは受けないんだけどな。おいおい、だからなんでそうなるんだよ。なんで俺を襲うんだよ。なあ、困っているなら話してくれよ。俺でよければ力になるぜ。君も同じ境遇かもしれないって感じるからさ。もしそうなら俺が助けてやるぜ。俺だって君の目的が何なのかわからない。ただ君が寂しそうに見えるんだ。だから心を開いて分かり合おうぜ。君は演算が好きなことは分かったけど、本当はそれだけじゃないだろ。そんな小さい世界に閉じこもってないで勇気を出せよ。もっと広い世界を知れば一緒に走り出したくなるぜ。
And Sage is a lot more deadlier in Japanese than she is in English. But yes, even in the terrible, badly written, hard to follow, boring, bland, jumbled mess that is the Japanese script of Frontiers, where the characters' dialogue sound like they're on autopilot for most of the time, Sonic wanted to help Sage is still there. And when I criticize the script, I don't mean to bash Kishimoto for this, because the dude isn't a writer. He has interesting ideas, but writing them down into a coherent story isn't his forte. So to see some people try and say the Japanese version is the better version because they get the characters right, makes me tilt my head in confusion with what I and they see. Because if Sonic's whole attitude with Sage in English and Japanese are roughly the same, then maybe, just maybe, this is the SEGA standard. At least, now it is. Before I wrap this up, let's take one more deep dive into Sonic and Surge whole debacle. And boy oh boy, do I love talking about this. I don't. I really don't. I pray that the good Lord himself would strike me down one more time every time I have to talk about this. It's been 2 years, people. Let it go! So anyway, let's talk about perspectives. It's a common writing trope, especially when it's used for the protagonist and antagonist of a story. While the hero may see the bad guy as well, the bad guy, that statement can be said for the hero as well. You are the villain in someone else's story. This trope is no different to the Sonic series, especially when that said series prides itself on pointing out the blatant obvious fact of, get it? Sonic's not a hero. Get it? Get it? Are you getting it? From time to time. It's led to some of the best stories of the series, but it also led to some of the worst stories of the series. IDW Sonic tackles this trope with Sonic and Surge. The various different covers of issue 50 make note of it. Now does it stick the landing of it? It's headache-inducingly complicated, but in my opinion, yes. In fact, I think when it comes to the whole perspective trope, the setup is perfect. To Surge, a whole character who had her whole life robbed away due to not only some fanboys' desire to be acknowledged by their idol, but because the hero's blatant refusal to take the reasonable decision to get the job done. This is her moment of revenge and laying everything out to Sonic. But to Sonic,
it was Tuesday.
He's been through situations like this before, and having someone who not only snatched him while he was talking to Tails, but then laid out these accusations on him while saying you're not only going to kill him, but other innocent people afterwards all in a few seconds. It's not gonna make him go, I'm sorry that happened to you, but more, who are you? And I like to dispel the whole notion that Sonic didn't care about Surge's whole ordeal. The issue made it very clear that he didn't know her or her full story. And no, her ranting and raving about letting Starline and Eggman go, even though he technically never let Starline go at all, that stupid platypus just manages to escape, doesn't count. Being made is just a vague statement for him to grasp the full picture on. People like to think that Sonic is so emotionally intelligent, but that really is when he's given all the info he needs to sort things out. Him wishing all the handkerchiefs for Char doesn't work if he didn't see and witness the abuse Eraser Jin had dealt to her. He was literally shown throughout SA1 Chaos' whole deal to make his assessment. Even one of his last lines about Shadow in SA2 doesn't hit if he hadn't learned his deal in the very last story of the game. People really take his words to her throughout the fight way too seriously. Him calling her whole deal a shtick isn't meant to be him putting her down or being condescending. It's him pointing out that he's been through people like Surge before. He even takes it back in his own way when it offends her. Can you really blame the guy? Stuff like this really does bleed into each other every so often, even he can point it out.
Oh, I get it. No problem. I'm used to stuff like this.
But if you're still that convinced that the real interpretation here is that Sonic truly didn't give a damn about Surge's traumatic experience and purposely ignored it because blah blah my morals, and it's so out of character, then I truly say this: it's not the first time. But I understand the criticism. He really could have handled the situation better. Surge is one of the more unstable adversaries he's dealt with, and a proper change of pace would have been needed. But that's what this speech was for. This speech has been analyzed, underanalyzed, overanalyzed, picked apart over and over, and under all that, it's literally, I prefer to let people have their freedom. No one should have that taken away. That's why if anyone tries to take that away from innocent people, I will stop them. Let's also have a do-over. That's it. That's his mantra. He wasn't trying to morally grandstand on why he's so great. He's just pointing out how he lives his life and how people have changed over the time. He's not forcing anything on anyone. He's also not above telling people to stop fighting. just giving them that option for that change because the door is always open. But why it doesn't work on Surge here is that, again, the lack of understanding. And one other thing, Surge, and when I say this, I do not mean to disparage anyone who has been a victim in their life, but Surge is just stubborn. Not only does she take his words out of context, but doubles down on her goals on destroying everything. For all her screams about her trauma, she's not looking to be understood by Sonic or by anyone. She just wants to lash out. But to be fair in both parties, I can see her perspective that having to hear the guy who she hates, not just because of her programming, but his so-called moral code is the reason that she has no freedom in her life. So to hear him supposedly double down on this moral code would piss her off. To her, Sonic is in the wrong. This fight is with two people who don't know each other on a personal level with beliefs that they're too stubborn to change. Anything other than that would just lead to a disaster, which was their first meeting. Keyword, first meeting. Because let me tell you something interesting. For all the talk issue 50 needlessly gets most of the time, it's not the most important part of the arc. Issues 55 and 56 are. This is when everything gets revealed and situations become very, very different. Sonic now understands what Surge was talking about, and what she went through, when they saw what Starlight did to her and Kid. You can see in their final fight that his attitude and demeanor are completely different than it was when they first fought. Here, he's trying to reason with her, that she doesn't have to do this. She doesn't have to follow Starlight's programming. Like he said, freedom is right there for her to take, but she is just too damaged to do it. You can compare her reaction to Sonic's words in both issues, and you can see which one hits more home to her. It's almost night and day. Hell, you can see those words linger on when she comes back in issue 67. I think the beauty of Surge as a character is that she's the only person that is affected negatively by Sonic as a character. Be honest here. Sonic always had this thing where people who either love him or dislike him in the end come off better versions of themselves when they get to know him more. But with Surge, the more she gets to know him, the worse she gets. It's why in issue 67, she's surprised to see that he has so many allies that once tried to waste him. Will she ever be redeemed? I don't know. The story isn't over yet. Do I feel she has a chance at it? I mean, yeah, but it's not gonna be just Sonic being the reason for it. As I close this, I just want to say, I get it. I get being frustrated with the writing of your favorite characters not being written like they used to be. It happens. I've been there. When Dragon Ball Super was airing, I wasn't a fan of how the characterizations of the characters were being written, especially with how Goku was. From a character that actually developed throughout the series to being a more mature person, to this blatant caricature, which kind of negates everything he's been through in the original series. I took a break from the series for 5 years, and only picked it back up due to tragic circumstances. And barring some glaringly stupid aspects still being present, I felt like the series was improving in some ways. And that's what I can say for Sonic's characterization. It's improving. It's getting back to what Sonic truly was as a character with IDW and Frontiers. We all care about consistencies for these characters, but when that drive for consistency consists of people just getting to shouting matches that end with, "You just don't understand the characters like I do," then we have to ask, what are these characters to you? What are they actually like? Is what you describe their personalities actually them? Is there clear evidence that they wouldn't do the things you say they wouldn't? No one would whatsoever contradict your statement of what that character should or shouldn't act or do, even when there's scenarios that say otherwise. Do I think the points I made will change some people's mind and see my perspective on things? Pfft, no! I'm willing to believe someone will just tell me I still don't understand or just call me an idiot. Or better yet, make a response to this. Don't lie, you're about to do it now. In the end, this is just my stance in this never-ending debate. Make it this as you will. But I'm not done with this characterization train. There's another hedgehog that gets the same controversy as Sonic, if not a whole lot worse.